I was crazy when I've seen how AI translated our 1 hour video.
Un momento, por favor. Un momentito.
It's not that language.
Can you share any real examples?
Don't commit credentials, don't create the same password, don't create a password called password.
Yay, microservices!
Welcome to the Fwdays podcast, which brings you voices behind the code. And let me introduce today's guests and speakers. So, as usually, my name is Ivashchuk. I'm solution architect. Together with me is Kyrylo Melnychuk and also Maryna Rybalko. Maryna, please tell us a bit about yourself and
Yes, thank you for introducing me. So just a few words about my background. I started my career about almost 8 years ago, and as typical as a software engineer, and then I was more engineering manager and a platform engineering lead in Jubel. It's a product company in Ukraine, so the largest job search company, and now I work for their basically payment enablement platform that builds the solutions for retailers and the global banks. So now my career is more in a fintech. I'm a speaker, I write articles, and they also have a recognized person in the fintech in the UK.
So talking about your fintech background, I think we will talk more about that today. So starting with the question, why tech people should know something about collecting and storing card details if they are not from fintech? Why we need to do that? Why we need to know that?
Yeah, so basically today, I wanted to touch more around, because the payment, it's a one part of this. It's a one side, but basically when we talk about like security, and it can be not only the payment data. The payment data is the most sensitive data, right? So we need to really care about the most, and especially everybody who works in a fintech, and specifically if you work with the large companies and specifically bank, because it's fintech, it's a regulated industry, especially in the UK, Europe, and US. So there are a lot of regulations in this industry. But even if the technical people, they don't work specifically with the card data, they still need to think about the way how they store any sensitive data, because we have other regulations like GDPR and many more to basically help individuals to protect their data and ensure that there will be no data breaches, because then it will impact the trust, right, of the company, and also it will impact the individuals, because once data compromised, you can receive 5 phone calls in a day from different scammers trying to convince you to do something, and it's not a pleasant experience, trust me.
Yeah, for sure. That's probably related not only to payment information and card information, but in general to any sensitive information that, of course, should be handled securely and using and following all the rules that we have that come in from relevant for Europe or USA or any other countries where we'd like to receive payments from, of course. So if we're touching your experience, because we believe you have like a lot of experience related to this field, can you share any real examples from your experience designing solution for these needs?
Yeah, so basically I can share from my experience that the last year I was leading the solution, and it was specifically the security enhancement and in the collecting and the storing card data. And as most things in payment industry, it was driven by regulation, because there is a regulation called PCI DSS. And every company that store and collects the card details, they must comply. So it's not a question, it's like you must comply. And they introduce, and this regulation, the very interesting thing about them is they're not constant. They always change and evolve, and you might see new versions coming. And it means that you always need to stay up to date with the changes, and then you should react and also introduce these changes, because all companies, they will go through the annual certification. And basically, if you're not compliant anymore, then you will not get certification, and you cannot, your business cannot keep running the way how it was before. So, and that's exactly what happened recently. So they introduced a new version of the PCI DSS compliance regulation, and was basically responsible to understand what we really need to do there, what improvements we have to do. I don't want probably to be very technical here, but on the high level to mention that they introduced the changes in the encryption requirements. So the disk level encryption was not enough, and they basically wanted the up level encryption, which is the higher level of encryption as well, on a different level. So, and for this, and if we talk about the complex payment system, you might imagine that it will be not only one service, there will be different parts of the system somehow interacting with the card data. So, and for this, basically what we built and designed, we designed the foundational component. And that's the very, everybody who works with a developer experience and technical people, it's a very common approach to design the foundational components for the system. As an example, it can be authorization. So that's the components that typically reused in different parts. And in our scenario, that's exactly what we did. So we created the secure storage as a component, and the idea was that all compliance requirements are incorporated in this service. So all different parts of the system, when they use this service and when they need to work with the card data, they just use this service and that's it. So for them, they don't need to think about okay, fine, how do I encrypt, decrypt? So it was basically the whole logic was inside the component.
Is your current company providing some embedded payment forms for some other projects, companies?
Yes, and this so it's kind of think about it like a Stripe or just like a payment gateway.
Yeah,
so, for example, when you go and shop online, mostly it's online payments. So when you go and shop online, even on Amazon, you put your card details, you just buy something, and that's all basically the widget to collect the card details, and then the payment processing backend. That's all the solution that we provide. So ability to pay with different payment methods in different countries, all of this.
I wanted to get back a little to PCI DSS topic and ask you, how's the compliance look like when you do the first or second level, which is usually not level for normal people, but for financial institutions, etc.?
It looks, I'd say, difficult and expensive. So if I need to describe in one word, it's expensive. So that's the first, and that's why you might see that the merchants, like just the online e-commerce, they would not really want to go into this space themselves. That's why all payment companies, they have these compliant widgets and the tokenization technology. So, and that's the main reason, because firstly, it's expensive, and expensive in terms of why, because you need to have the right expertise. Then you need to go through the regular certification, and it involves the assessment, analysis of the infrastructure, and it's the constant work basically that people really do. And as well, when you build the solution, you need to ensure that all requirements are there, like the key rotation, encryption. So all the details, and the more you touch basically secure data in the card data in your system, the more you expose yourself to this regulation, the compliance, because everybody wants what they try to do is to minimize basically exposure and the transfer of the card data throughout the system. But if I really have to answer it in one word, it's very expensive. And if you go there, you need to understand why would you do it? Typically, here the goal of the company who have the scale. So who have the scale, and then they can afford, and for them, they have their reasons.
No, the certification process by itself, guess we already done it. All the implementation that we read in some books or manuals. I think that they exist. So after that, how long time does it take to certify?
Yeah, so typically it's the on average, I'll say like the typically from my experience. So typically you will engage the QSA. This is the person who will advise you on the enhancement that you need to do. But in terms of the certification itself, it's just a dedication for like I'd say less than a month. But it's a dedication and it's the work that you're doing.
Yeah, I remember at my last two projects, we used some, of course, systems or services to avoid storing any card information on our
That's
own.
exactly
And
what you
of
should
course,
do.
and it was that was Stripe, and the second one is Zora. I'm not sure. Maybe someone is familiar with that, of course, but yeah, that's not that popular as Stripe for sure. So yeah, and if we continue to discuss this like sensitive information, and of course nobody would like to store card details to do not be like more attractive for some attackers. Could you please share from your experience or your recommendation how to collect data correctly if that's related to some card information, payment information, and so on?
Yeah, so like if my advice would be for anybody is like, don't try to go this direction firstly yourself. So unless like, so it depends what type of the company is it, right? So if we're talking about the merchant, it's a one story. If we're talking about the payment service provider, so it's a company that really the main business, the core business, it's like really payment processing. So for these specific companies, the firstly, what I would really recommend is to have a strong expert, firstly, the strong security expert who really understands all nuances and who knows, because the regulations, typically the requirements can be interpreted in a different ways. So usually it's not like you need to have a strong expert who really knows the expectations, who really done it before and who understand the process. So, and there are a lot of certified people in the industry, even consultants who can come and really help design. So now once we have the expert, right, who knows the requirements, what we should do, then it will be much easier because there are already components and they even cloud, like we use AWS, and there are already services like a key management that already provided by the big companies that can be used. So that's would be in terms of the engineering, how to design it. It's more around like leverage the existing solutions that exist and ensure that you follow all requirements. And probably the one I would also like recommend is don't really try to implement it in a different parts of the system. So we should, because that copy paste typically it's a very error prone and a human error here can be involved when you just try to copy and paste. I would suggest to centralize it. So if you have something that complex and it can be reused, I'd suggest to centralize it and don't really just try to leverage one. If you build once, leverage it, and then when you need to make changes it will also help because you would need to make changes in one place, right? Not go and try to find, oh, where is it, and then try to make the same changes in multiple places. So typically it's not the best way how I would approach it, but yeah, so that would be probably my recommendation in terms of how to build this. And it always like in terms of the what's very important part as well, like the code, like we should ensure that like in the vulnerabilities, it's we put the vulnerability scanners and we need to ensure that when we really deploy the code, we treat like high, medium. So we started with the high and the highest, like the risk level, and we then just block deployment is not allowed if there is any vulnerabilities in your code. Done. And then you go to medium and then also block. So you try to basically minimize the risks on the each level. So then you understand, okay, fine, your system is like it's secure. And the interest, that's also very important part, is access and login monitoring of access. So only the specific people should have access to the data, and everything should be monitored. It's a part of the requirements as well, but the access to as ideally nobody should ever have access to the card data except very few people who really need it. So that's, and the all logins, the all accesses should be monitored. So I will not probably say something like basic, don't share credentials. So use the individual account.
Don't commit credentials.
Don't create
right?
this. Don't commit credentials. Don't create the same password. Don't create a password called password. So that should be a bit more difficult, right? So it should be a bit more complex, but yeah.
Yeah, that's
lovely.
true. And
that's my lovely topic you said about just encapsulate everything in a separate service. Yay, microservices.
Yeah. Well, it's a microservice, but it's a purely it's a microservice with the pure goal of the storing the card details. That's it. So there's only one job: store and get. That's it. There shouldn't be there is no logic in terms of that related to the encryption and the storage. So that's why. And then the beautiful part of this, it can be as well reused. So not only for the card data, or basically if you, for example, in our scenarios, we store the credentials to how to connect to gateways. So if we connect to different gateways, different third-party systems, typically you would have a credentials to connect. So, and this also should be typically securely stored. So that's something that we also will leverage, basically this component, to ensure that it follows the all standards, and it's a safe way for us to reuse it in a different places as well. So that's kind of how we leverage it.
And talking about key storages, because in my mind, at first appears Vault, probably the most popular tool to store securely keys.
Yeah.
But could you recommend from your experience what is more suitable for such sensitive information, like card and so on?
I'd say it depends, because even keys can be different. So if I've worked on the two different functionalities in the projects, and they depends on the type of keys, I would say as well. So we use the HSM, and there is also the AWS, they provide HSM, but also the beautiful part of payments is each country might have the different standards. So, and these standards might not be natively supported by some providers. So, and for example, if you work in a specific region, there will be different providers that will also provide some sort of HSM, but it will be with a native support of a standard, a specific country. So in terms of that's the one, and in terms of if we're talking about the cards, AWS, if you're in the cloud, so the cloud all provide. I know about AWS because that's something that we leverage. Don't know much about the Google and the Azure, but AWS, they have basically key management, and it's you can. They provide, and they provide also the SDKs to work with this, so you can easily really integrate. So, and they provide basically the mechanism for you, so it will be easier for you as well. But as I said, in the payments, the keys even, it's not that straightforward. Depends on the type of the key. You might want to consider different providers. Depends on the level of security you need as well, because that's all very regulated, and it's regulated to the point is if it's physical, if you host it on premise, if it's the physical servers, right, or if it's the a physical HSM devices, there is this book of the regulations and the policies, who should have access, and it's difficult, who should approve this access, how it can be used. So what we should understand is, I would probably recommend to go with existing providers. So understand your problem, understand what you're really solving for, what you need, and try to find the providers who will give you this functionality, because typically payments is a industry that has a lot of different, I'd say, players, and it's very competitive industry. So because it's very competitive industry and with big players, there will be always even new players who try to kind of enter the market and with some and solve some small problem and then scale. So typically in payments, from my experience, I would say there will be already the provider who will give you the solution you need. And for you, the goal will be just evaluate in terms of the regulations, compliance, and your needs, because not all like solutions might really solve your specific problem.
Talking about policies, regulations, and compliances, you mentioned that different countries have different compliances. So my question here is, what is the craziest regulation you ever had to deal with in some country?
Well, it's a very good question. So I'll say that all countries, the PCI DSS set standard. So everybody, like, it's just standard, everybody has it. So then when we go, and it also depends like on the, because in payments, we can work on a different levels. So the payment processing, typically it touches like the payment gateway. It's like a stripe, right? So when then after the payment gateway, the typically will be acquirer. So historically it was a bank, but now it can be any technically fintech with a license. So and then after acquirer, we have a scheme and the issuer. So this typically it's a journey for the payment processing. It can be modified, but it's a typical journey. And the thing is, we can work on a different levels, right? So if you work as a payment, if you do integration, you're a merchant, you do integration with to payment gateway, you're fine. So if you, the payment processor, right, or gateway, and you try to do integration, for example, directly to scheme, so that will be the scheme rules apply. And if you do the direct integration to scheme, you would have to do there is a more like I'd say process involved with scheme directly to get the membership, to follow the all rules, the certification, all of this stuff. From my experience, the craziest thing I probably worked with, it was the AS2805 standard in Australia. So where we had to build the integration directly to this standard. And that was because it's even not the API, it's a messages, like ISO messages, ISO type messages. And it involves like, firstly, why it's the craziest? Probably because it involves like a lot of security in terms of the keys, the key management, the key rotation, and why it's like so the deeper you go, right? So the closer you try to get to the scheme, the more harder it becomes. So if you integrations like just with third-party gateways, it was fine. So honestly, just as a typical API, you would take any API. Yeah, there may be some documentation. Well, maybe worst case scenario, you'll find like 70 plus fields. You probably have no idea why they exist, what they mean. Fine. You'll Google a little bit and it will work somehow, right? But the more you go and the more you kind of now bind it with the rules and regulations. So like specifically the scheme rules, and you take some sort of responsibility as well, becomes a bit more tricky, I'd say. So for me, I think the crazy is to really go deep there and try to, that's why not a lot of people really want to do it.
And usually you have something like you should do it really quickly and integrate some payment systems into your application. So yeah, there is no time to go through all those processes correctly. So much easier, of course, pay for some well-known service, of course. Yeah, that's
Yeah,
true.
you're right. So it all depends, right? As I always say, it all depends like on a goal and what we are optimizing for, right? So,
Yeah,
for
true.
example, if you're a small startup, and that's what the all AI, most of the AI companies, the new that just launched, they use Stripe. Well, because I really, I tried Stripe. I used their, try to integrate them because like just myself. And I can really, I can give them credits. It's really easy. Like it's very straightforward. It's easy. And if you have no idea about payments, you can just get it launched very easily. Just simple. But then the problem is when you become like when you large company, and then you start checking your fees that Stripe charges you. Then what's the question will kind of say, okay, probably do I really want to do it? Or there is other option. So typically, yes, to get started, I get you. That's right. But then once you scale, then typically company would ask the same question again, or again with scale they'll try to optimize for things like authorization rate just to ensure that the payments that customers submitted they all successfully go through, they don't fail. So, and then when you start optimizing for this success rate of their payments, and you see, then you might want to play as well with the solutions, the providers. So it kind of depends on your goal and the scale, I would say, and also the region, like where you operate.
About the
Yeah,
scaling
that's true.
and getting a little bit back to the PCI DSS and other standards and storing card data. As I know, you can correct me if I'm wrong. You cannot store card data if you're not PCI DSS 1 or 2 compliant, but you can store card tokens. What is
Yes.
that, and why it's like approved and allowed, and how do they help to be secure? How do they help for end customers to shop online securely?
Yes, so that's a very good one, and that's why I said don't try to really deal with cards. So the just to give you a bit like a quick overview, like how we arrived to this destination and why it's really why it matters. It's historical, like if we think about it, right? So if you the with this online boom, the companies and they okay, COVID, we need to sell online. So because people now like change their habits and it's fine. So the companies need to keep up. So the thing is what's happening is firstly we started with collecting the data, card data, but then we quickly realized that at every stage the card data will be exposed. So when you send the card, you will send card data to the gateway, you will send the card data to the acquirer, you will send to scheme, issuer, and back. So, and that's the problem with it because you give more opportunities, right, to take and steal this card data, which is the problem. So, and then what happened is the gateways, like a Stripe, the MPGS, the different gateways, they came up with their concept and they said gateway tokens. The gateway tokens is basically they say they took away burden from merchants in terms of the collecting, storing card details, so they handle it. What they give merchants is just a token. This token, it's like they it can be used for the payments, right? But the thing is, again, because it's issued by a specific gateway, they locked. So the merchant cannot really they use these tokens across the gateway. And typically the large players, they would have the different gateways. So and then the scheme came to the game and said, well, what if we do the network tokens? And we will make sure that it will be more secure than you have today. And basically, we will motivate you even more because we will lower the price for you if you will start using the network tokens. So, and the core idea of the network tokens is that the scheme will issue them and they will be, so they will, if they are stolen, they're useless. So,
Why?
and what because you cannot use them like for payment, just tokens. You would need to generate cryptogram, and that's a bit different. So if it's just stolen, fine. So it's not that sensitive as the card, right? And now, even with the agentic payments, the network tokens, like they are becoming like more and more recognizable. But now, why I would suggest and why I would recommend using the network tokens, firstly, it's a security. And like from my experience, I can say that even authorization rates with network tokens are higher because the issuers would trust them more. So they will naturally be, for merchants, they will be naturally better choice, and it will be more secure as well. And in terms of like the additional benefits that the scheme like to motivate people to do something. So as an additional benefits, they say, okay, fine. If for example, the card, you saved your card, right, somewhere online, and your card expired, probably you will be asked to enter the card again because card expired. With network tokens, no. With network tokens, if even card expired, the network token will be updated because your card will be extended. So typically is the network tokens give a benefit as well of the issuer updates. So meaning that when card information changes, you still have the valid network tokens. And it's a very good benefit for the subscription-based businesses, because if you look at how many payments fail because of incorrect card details, you will see it's a bit significant numbers.
But
So
not for the customer.
well, for the customer, so for customer, it depends, because if you subscribed, right, you kind of gave your consent already. So it's kind of just the way how then your information is up to date. So it's more about like when you add your card, you give the consent, so your card is stored. That's they're all scheme, they will approach it differently. Some schemes they will replace, some schemes they will put the bot and say if their card got replaced. So for example, if your card lost or stolen and you reissued new cards, then they will ask to enter the new card again. So but in terms of like the security and the benefits, like a cheaper authorization rate, less exposure of the card data, I think the network tokens, like that's a great choice. And I see that more and more large players, they adopt this. And like I know, even if we follow the Stripe, Adyen, they will promote it in their new campaigns. So and they also promote it because of the authorization rate. So, and of course, that's the idea.
That's interesting. I'm also wondering how they handled like this, even if card is expired, but token is still valid. So that's also
Because
interesting.
it's very easy, because schemes they issue these network tokens, and the issuers, so issuers your bank who gave you the card, so issuers will basically notify them, so they will say okay, fine, that's the kind of change. Yeah, that they all scheme, they
like
have their programs.
Direct communication with banks are happening
They
here.
all they all talk, trust me.
Yeah. I believe you for sure. As you mentioned before about vulnerabilities, that if there is some vulnerability issue appeared or recognized in some packages, dependency libraries, whatever, and deployment is blocked. That's like common probably for all normal companies, because company that I've been working for, they all have this rule. Like if everything appeared, so and high, even medium or high, like deployment is blocked, release also should be fixed. But what kind of other attacks you have seen most often in the payment related stuff?
Yeah, I think like because payments, right, as an industry. So it's everybody would like, the all fraudsters, they would like to gain something because it's directly taking money, right, and moving money to their account. So it's a very easy thing to, and they would always target. So yeah, they're not even like a payment company. That sadly, but the targets will be mostly the merchants, the websites, like online websites who sell groceries, whatever online. They will be the target, and the main reason they will be the target because there are different, like I'll say the probably the popular attacks that I've seen personally, and it can be quite damaging for the merchants. And again, to handle it themselves, it will be expensive, so they would leverage some other provider for this typically. But there are two types. The first one, I would say, it's the card testing. So the card testing, it's in terms, for example, you as a fraudster, right? You got the card numbers and the expiration date, because CVV will not be typically stored. Nobody will store it. So they will only have the card number and the expiration date in the best scenario. And what they'll try to do is they'll try to basically enter this card number and expiration date on the website. And there are different, and they will just try multiple different cards, everything they have. And they will try small amounts, because typically small amounts like the less than $1. Why? Because it will not be that like suspicious at the beginning for the fraud prevention mechanism. So they will try to leverage like a small number and see which card is valid. So when they recognize that card is valid, then they'll try. And that will be the one. But this one requires you at least to have the cards. Another one which I also saw, and I saw it like with larger players specifically. So it's a bean attack. So that's very common. And what it means for this one, it's typically you even don't need cards. You just need the bean. And bean can be accessible as a public information. So you might know the bean. The core idea of this attack bean, typically it's the first six or 8 digits, depends on the card. So, and then what they'll try to do is the core idea, they'll automate it with all bots doing all of this sort of things. They'll just try to find the right card number, just the enumeration. Just try to choose. They have been, and the next one is how I can guess the rest. And what it will give, firstly, it will increase the traffic for the merchant website. If you can imagine, right? You get the bean for 6 and then you need to guess the rest and you just attack. It will, of course, create a damage, and typically the merchant will still face the fee for this failed transaction. The merchant will still, it might slow down also experience for proper customers, like just user who really just buying groceries on Sunday, they might experience issues with payments because of these attacks, and their reputation, of course. So like if it gets somewhere publicly, oh, this company experienced a bean attack, it like the reputational damage. And especially it's more around like it can happen to anybody, right? We cannot prevent it specifically from happening, but what we can do, and that's what we kind of where we target usually, is how we block it as early as possible. So the idea is to identify that this is happening and then prevent it from continuing. So then just to minimize the risk, because we cannot convince all fraudsters to stop, right? Then the fraud would not exist and the fraud prevention as an industry would not exist as well. So that's but that's the common I really saw in my experience. And for merchants, they will face like losses. So that's just that. And if they get the card number right, so then it will be, they can buy some luxury like Louis Vuitton stuff, whatever. Typically, they will target then just buying stuff and they can resell it.
We're talking about merchants. How a regular merchant can prevent that? Because they usually have a form on the website, payment form, the credit card data, etc., but this forum is hosted on the payment gateway side. It's not depends on the merchant. I could even don't know that something is happening and somebody is trying to enter the card and don't do it correctly. But after that, and the second question here is, okay, somebody did it correctly. I processed this payment. I shipped this order. Why did I run? Like, everything's fine. It's not my fault that somebody stole the card and made shopping on my website. What's here for me?
Yes, like honestly, I can understand where you're coming from, but sadly, if we talk about like liability in the payment industry, merchant will take losses unless the merchant will introduce the like some sort, depends on like region, but the typically authentication should be put in place, and it can be done like probably you notice sometimes when you buy something online, you add your card and then some small window will be shown to you and they'll say, can you confirm payment in mobile app, or we will send you SMS, can you confirm the payment?
Yeah,
So
like
this step
3DS.
typically, yes. So this step will typically be here to prevent, to authenticate really, but not all merchants, depends on the location, because 3DS is mandatory in the UK and Europe as a market. US, no. Australia, no. So it's not in all regions, it's mandatory. That will be up to the merchant to decide. But if the 3DS, so for example, if you as a merchant really introduce the 3DS and the customer really, so the fraudster successfully somehow managed to pass this, then you will not take liability. So it will be not for you because you really did your best. It will be the bank. But the problem is like if you didn't do it, then sadly you will take losses. And if we look at the big players, fraud losses, it's a significant like numbers. So, and typically the merchants will target the players like they know the big one as well. And it all depends. So as a merchant, what you can do and what you should do is it's whatever in your power to prevent this from happening. Like, and it will be always the balance, because if you say, I want to introduce always 3DS, you can do it. And especially specifically if you're in the region where there is like it's a requirement, you should do it, and you really have to introduce it. Will limit it, so it will help you prevent the attacks, and you should think about it like it's your responsibility at the end of the day, because even if something happened on your website, then it's your brand. So, and the customers can, sadly, but customers can also complain. It's saying, oh, like when this attacks happening and the customers cannot buy something, the groceries, whatever, they can also complain and say, oh, I cannot buy, this site is payment doesn't work, I don't know, I'll go to somebody else. So it's more around, yes, sadly, the merchants is the one who really carries the most, but they should really put an effort, and they should really understand that it's their responsibility. We can, like, if we're talking about, there can be different also in terms of like the authorized push payments, but it's and then depends also on the regulation. So if you were forced, somebody called you and said, hey, from your bank transfer the money, so it's called authorized push payment. So in this depends on the regulation. You as the customer might be responsible, or bank can be responsible. So the industry trying to prevent the fraud from a different place, from the way how they can do it. So, and even if you notice, like them, I saw it specifically for the last few years, definitely now with the AI fraud preventions, they can detect and they can help merchants, and the payment providers, they will typically build it as a part of their solution, because it's a basics. I'd say it's a fundamental fraud prevention. It's a fundamental parts that the most providers will give you. It can be depends on the region. The different provider might be the best one, but it will be just a part of the functionality they provide.
Yeah,
Yeah,
thanks. Short one here, Sarina. So, Maryna, you told that in Europe and UK, it's strictly enforced to have 3DS. But when I shop on Amazon, on Spanish one, they do not ask 3DS. They do not even ask my CVV. I just put my card number, date of expiration, and that's it. It's enough for them. I understand that they are even the payment provider, or maybe more in hierarchy of this payment system. But how do they comply if they do not ask that?
That's interesting because depends like when I shop on Amazon and my card issued in UK, I definitely saw this experience going. So if even the first time when you add your card and there is no confirmation, nothing, it depends. Maybe because your card issued in a different location. So
Yeah,
maybe
maybe.
there is something in their system is going off. So I just they cannot detect correctly. But ideally, they must do it. For the idea is for all customers who shop in these countries, they should put their prevention. They might. So what they might do is, and that's what Amazon does. That's what most companies will do as well. They will ask you on the first time when you enter card details. They ask you confirmation. And they'll they show you a small checkbox and say, do you want to save for future purchase? And if you say, yes, I want to do it, then they will not ask because then it will fall under stored credential framework. And then they will still, if there's something fraudulent happen, they will carry the loss. But the idea is that will give them a confidence that you already confirmed it. So it's your card. And unless you report it lost or stolen, right, it should be fine to use this card. And if it's in your account as well. So you add the card to your account, which is also extra kind of protection. So somebody needs to get access to your account to really benefit, and it will be account takeover, but it will be the different story as well. So yes, they should do it. And I suggest like they do it. It just depends on maybe your card just didn't fall under the rules.
Yeah, maybe because it's Ukrainian one.
That can be the case. So if it's a Ukrainian card, that maybe.
But even Ukrainian, there is 3GS enablement on bank side. But yeah, that depends also,
Yeah,
of course.
that can be another case because if your card is not enrolled to 3DS, they cannot do anything.
They don't have like this extra question if I agree to be charged, like just like if you click I'd like to order something, so no confirmation that you agree to be charged, and yeah,
that's
no extra checks.
of...
I don't know why, to be honest. Need to double check
it's because
how
they have good lawyers and they do not care about that. And yeah, maybe they calculated that losses on unfinished cards is less
higher?
is more than losses on the lawsuits. Maybe that.
maybe that's true.
Sure, they have a reason for it. Definitely, I'm sure.
Yeah. Or maybe there is some small checkbox somewhere.
A hidden one.
Yes. So just need to find it and enable. But yeah, that's interesting, of course. And yeah, as we're talking, like there's like several ways how a merchant can prevent some frauds. But of course, usually it comes from people, from like human mistakes. So let's switch to the topic related to social engineering and human factors. And my first question would be, why do so many security breaches still come down to human error? I believe you have also such experience as well.
Yeah, so and that's like the security, if we talk about it, right? So it has two different sides. The first one is the technology, like you use, how good that technology really is.
Yeah.
And that's the very important part. Without this, like you cannot comply with regulations, and without this, you additionally expose the system to unnecessary risk. But another part is like we now the human, the people, they work in the companies. And the thing is that we also, the human, the people, they can have the access to information, or they can be in a position to authorize some certain actions and make some certain decisions. And if we think about it, the core goal of the fraudsters, right, in any way, just get money. So it's that simple as that. They want, it's their salary, it's their job, and they kind of earn based on how good they are. That's sadly, but that's the way how it really is. And they can be very sophisticated. They have, like I saw when in the news, it was the office space fully with the computers, that fully organized as the office. They were just pure scam fraud department. So that's everybody was a scammer. So they came to every day they come to their work, and then they say, okay, fine, let me work today, and they just scam. So, and that's that's sadly truth that exists in the world. And the main idea is, so that's why I was like saying, you can protect your system, right? Really, it can be brilliant. But if the employees, they're not really trained also on a security, like just a basic security, I'd say, measurement. So for example, like don't click any unnecessary link, the emails that are coming from a legit domain, but with the small changes in the like a domain name. It like also don't try to click there, don't react if it's reset your password, you lose access to your system now if you don't do it. So it's also because the idea is they try to trick, and that's very like I'd say it's really cruel to just go and try to trick it's a human psychology, just our fear, there's sometimes greed, and sometimes just desire to help. And it's all the scammers really very well trained in human emotions and psychology, so they know how to manipulate. They know what to use. And if, for example, people never experience this, they don't even know that it exists, they're not educated, they're not aware, by default, they will be the target.
Talking about education, which practical steps can company use to teach their employees and prevent different scams?
Yeah, I can give like examples like from what we do. Is the first one is required training for everybody. So every year, everybody should go through the training, and it should be training about like a social engineering, GDPR, the security, like how you operate, how you use the passwords, the complexity, just the basic security. So everybody in the company, it doesn't matter what your job. So you technical, not technical, customer support, everybody should go through this, and everybody should do it regularly. So then this knowledge still exists in their minds. And the next one is, well, fine, you can read about it multiple times, then you wake up next day and probably half the information you don't remember, which is great. That's the way how our brain works, nothing unusual. So that's why what we also typically do is we just train it by fake attacks. So someday, randomly, you just kind of launch some sort of attack. So, for example, you can send emails to everybody and say, "Oh, please reset your password. You just now you will lose your access to your account." And then what happens is, well, some people will react, and you should be like the companies should be ready for it, that it will take time. But what happens is that more you do it, the more people stop and start thinking before doing really something. Because typically the core kind of like mistake that we make is we don't think, we just act. we act very fast without thinking, and that's the what this fraudster try to do. If you like read the cases that happens, their core idea is don't let you think at all. They want to push you to emotions as much as they can, right? They want to push you to do it faster now. Don't talk to anybody. Let's just get it sorted. I'm like, you can trust me, like all of this nice stuff, right? But if the core like idea of these practices and the fake attacks, it's to ensure that people will stop before taking any actions. They'll stop and think. And now, right, before we were thought like, okay, fine, check all the letters in the domain if it's legit or not. But now with AI, when you pick up a phone and the real person really calls you and you hear the voice, it's your manager, really, and you can recognize that it's your manager. It becomes very important to really stop and think about it. Like, shall I really take actions? And ideally, to put some processes and procedures in place, not to allow one person to just make a decision, add some validation. So add somebody else who will also kind of validate if it makes sense, because typically it's a similar as the code review, right? So you just kind of you write some code and then somebody reviews and gives you a second opinion, and it's always great to have a second opinion, because the one person, even for example, something can happen, right? You woke up, you may be very tired, or maybe you're just going through some stress in your life, you're mentally exhausted, and the attackers will try to find some people who, like, I'd say, who can be easier target, and it's typically people who go through the challenges, so that's newcomers. So ideally, you need to understand that, fine, but they can happen even for you. So it's better to put somebody else as well who can additionally validate, and before making decisions or sharing any information, just really validate and don't really act. That's what probably would be my best advice.
Yeah, that's I totally agree with you. And currently, at Global Logic, we have also like extra round of the security trainings related to AI, because there can be voice generated by AI that would sound really the same as your manager's voice, or it can be even like some face generated, video recorded, or whatever, like so many ways how it can be done. So yeah, of course, like the most important recommendation, just to use your the secured way to communicate with one or another. Like it can be a bank system, or it can be some people from your company. Just contact them via proved or secured way. Maybe that's like some emails, whatever. Of course, there should be established some set of tools that are approved and used day to day.
Yes,
So yeah.
and based on the data, every 1 out of 4 executives, they say that their company was targeted. And we will see more and more of this coming. So it means that the thing is, we cannot really prevent it from happening fully, right? We cannot stop them and say, hey, don't target us. Well, it doesn't work like this.
Yeah.
But what we can do is, once they target the company, then we can put the right mechanism in place. And that was already like the case when the advertisement, the company, they were targeted, and also this voice cloning, very nicely done. They faking the executive, but they prevented it by just stopping thinking and having the right procedures. So it's possible. We need to ensure that the education is in place as well, because now we can say still, okay, we can say check if the lips is synchronized with the voice, but the more model becomes sophisticated, these all little details will be more kind of difficult to detect, right? So it will the technology will improve. Exactly. So the technology will improve. I saw how AI can even generate realistic veins on your face. That's impressive.
Yeah. And lip sync, it's already done.
Yes, exactly. So, and once you thought some small kind of trick how to detect, well, it will be just easily just improved and fixed by technology. So we should always put like our judgment and really stop before acting, especially if we know the consequences, because consequences can be huge and it can be millions in losses, and it will be, of course, public information. So if the company lost, so then it will not, it will have a consequences. So we just need to think about consequences as well.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. And of course, probably the most popular phishing attack, or like social engineering attacks, of course, that's related to something like someone calling from bank and pushing you to provide details. And most people still like doing these things because they're like under pressure, and they just, I don't know, become more stressful during the call, and just stop thinking logically and do not really nice things, of course.
No, makes sense. And the core idea is like they want you to stop thinking. They don't want you to think. And you will not realize. And the people like who really went through this experience, they also said like it's just they didn't understand why they reacted this way. They so sophisticated to trick you to the right mind space. So then your whole logical system is blocked. You just acting based on the emotion, which is like, it's very dangerous. And they always will target the people like the older people and even the young people as well, but the more vulnerable people, which is sad, but that's the reality. So everybody should really understand and just educate themselves.
Yes, yeah, totally agree. So education is our strength to avoid any fraud attacks, to recognize quickly social engineered, and we probably looking for some tool that could help us to quickly analyze and like mark that's AI generated video or voice or image or whatever, because sometimes it's really not that easy to recognize, even though like deep fake videos can be recognized by some tiny details like shadows or some
But it could be
unseen.
not a deep fake video, but a real video where real people talk, but somebody changed using AI. What do they talk about? And it's lip synced, absolutely working. Like I was crazy when I've seen how AI translated our 1 hour video into English. And after that, when I have seen how I speak Chinese with full lip sync, I was totally crazy and totally done.
Nice.
So yeah, we will see that more and more and more. Okay, we talked about a lot of things here, but sadly our time is coming to end. So what you can say to anyone who is interested about security of their products, not just fintech? One piece of advice.
One piece of advice, that's I'd say like if we're talking firstly is start including security into the product from a day one. And there is a lot of certifications like on the market and the education available, professional training, especially in the security. So I suggest just take it and really try to educate yourself as well. So for me, that would be, of course, I like engineers and everybody, like technical people who design the solution. They might not necessarily need to be called an expert and know all aspects, but to have like a fundamental and the basic knowledge, I think it's a very important part for everybody really who builds that technology product, because security is just a part of the every product, and it's it's the critical part, I think, of every product.
Yeah,
So
that's
like
true.
my one piece of advice would be like start thinking from day one and train yourself.
And hire security engineer if possible.
not a lot of companies, so people can afford that.
Yeah, if possible, if budget allows, of course.
Yeah, it's like I suggest it's better to spend this money on the one person or than fines and the dealing with the consequences. So it depends also, right? Like if you're a small company,
So,
probably you will be a little bit invisible. But the moment you grow, then you become more visible. And then when you become visible, you become more target. So it's more around like the risks as well. The risk grow with scale, typically.
So thank you very much, Maryna, for joining us here today, tonight, at this virtual studio. Thank you, Ina. Thank you very much, everybody who have watched us. And please subscribe, like, comment here, ask questions that you want to know from Maryna, from us. And we will see you with our next episode.
Yeah, thank you all. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.